How can you have a transit-oriented development where people live and work if they don't like living there because of the freeway noise? Mm-hmm. It's not going to work. So if you're going to invest in a station, in my opinion, it makes sense to commingle both the rubber tire and the steel wheel in a way that the station can actually serve a residential community that can be proud of where they want to live.
So it can be friendly to the community,
yes.
Friendly to the environment, because this is part of the environment. Our ears
is part of sensory experience of the environment.
Yeah, it's, you protect the character of the island.
And you allow it to be a viable economic resource for the broader community. And just think about it, if you save $750 million in the process, why would you not want to do that?
Okay, there must be some downside to this.
But just pause for a minute. We'll pull up on the screen a sound barrier idea.
Okay, so we'll close this.
And this might take a while to find because I think it's buried pretty deep in.
All right, and
oh no, it's right here.
Right there, huh? Okay, so maximize that guy. Okay.
Okay. So
this is a sound mitigating solution. This would be a artistic kind of a sound wall. Is this glass? Maybe you can describe what we have going here.
David, what we have here is a glass sound wall.
Okay.
And it is metaphorically similar in look as say a deciduous forest would be along the shoreline of the Columbia River. So, but yet it's composed of steel and glass, so it's modern. It's man-made. It shows a contemporary sensitivity to how to place and contain the noise of a freeway within an urban setting. Now we pay more for that, and we burden ourselves with additional maintenance, but the ability to create essentially half a dozen new city blocks and an additional half dozen city blocks without noise, and enough of a critical mass to say we have 20 contiguous city blocks that can be a destination for many thousands of people to live and work. To me, it makes this investment self-evident. Mm-hmm. And now we would worry about, say, birds running into it. So we'd probably fret the glass so it's not transparent but translucent. We might put a color in it, and we might hold it in place by what look like tree branches that hold it. But not a design. This is just an indicative illustration of what the community can use in terms of architectural expression to contain that noise and still create a sense of place that's unique. In fact, if this was done on Hayden Island, this would be a showplace for the world of how to contain the objectionable noise of a freeway, make it look delightful. You commingle in there the elevated light rail station, and then the station floats in a forest of steel and glass. It could be a wonderfully rich architectural experience.
So you're not just simply a concrete bridge designer or a steel bridge designer. You care about the aesthetics of it. You care about it, how it's going to look to the community. You care about the sound design of it.
Fit for function means it must meet with the subjective, qualitative aspirations of a community. That requires tremendous sensitivity to the aesthetics of what we do. And yes, I take great pride in whatever I do. It is as aesthetically viable as it can possibly be. We can take joy in it when it's finished.
So so the community, I would think, if they care about those issues, and I would think they would. If I lived on Hayden Island, I would expect that it would be great if you could minimize the cost and minimize the ugliness and the sprawl of this thing.
And if you did not accommodate this 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people within a desirable Hayden Island, they sprawl. They need to live somewhere else. So
you drive them out.
And we have a light rail station there. Does it make sense not to do it? No. So anyway, Hayden Island.
Okay. Can we look at the Vancouver side and see about the footprint there? Okay. We'll close this and we'll put the other. Okay, we're looking at two different designs. This is on the Vancouver side. What are all these red blocks here?
Well, David, what I've tried to do on the left is show how a straight freeway coming out of the gap between Fort Vancouver and downtown Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. When you cover up the light here, it's your shade. It's automatic light control here.
Trust technology.
So here's your bridge.
And it goes across straight. And if we have a collector distributor underneath the through lanes, we basically have the potential for nothing on the ground plane. But we do have to connect with SR 14, State Road 14. I think Vancouver should have a street-level connection between the waterfront and Fort Vancouver. In what's currently being proposed, you cannot do that.
It divides, the current proposal divides the city.
Right, much as it occurs now. Okay, so I wanted a solution that reconnected Fort Vancouver with Lower Vancouver and made a more continuous connection of the waterfront for urban enjoyment and brought the downtown of the city into the waterfront experience. When I looked into the master plans that the city has for their future, they were kind of forced to ignore that portion of the city because of the presence of the freeway. And I thought that was unfortunate. And that's the heart and soul of Vancouver. Fort Vancouver was formed. Vancouver was an adjacent trading post. That's how the community grew. There was a ferry crossing. Then there was a first bridge. And then it was separated by a noisy, intrusive freeway. And that's the way we've been doing business in Vancouver for the last 50 years. I think the city should try to reconnect with the waterfront and Fort Vancouver.
Yeah, with the
now
waterfront development here, they actually kind of put that on hold here because of the impact and
anything that we can do with this freeway to make this area more attractive makes that development more viable. I think
so. It helps Hidden Island. It helps this. Is this recaptured?
Well, if we look over here on the right, what's in red is the actual footprint of the current proposal that would not be there with the straight alignment. Now the noise shadow, you'll notice here, is a little bit wider because I assumed that we would not contain the noise within a sound barrier. But I would think on the Vancouver or the Fort Vancouver side we would do that, so we'd bring in the sound barrier. But what I found fascinating about this is the stacking of the collector, distributor, and the through lanes actually ends up with a smaller footprint in Fort Vancouver than the current proposal or even the current freeway. So it reduces the land take in Fort Vancouver. It connects the tourist portion of the fort with downtown Vancouver with a city street that does go through this forest of columns that supports the freeway. But I would think that that would be a wonderful opportunity for an artist and engineer to collaborate to really suggest something like maybe old growth trees that connect the fort with what is the river and the trading town, and it creates a wonderfully rich pedestrian environment in which a visitor from Portland could take light rail over to Vancouver on a weekend, get off the train, 3 blocks, and you're enjoying the cultural resource that is Fort Vancouver. Wow. Vancouver becomes a destination for people on weekends, as well as a better place to live and work.
Rather than the city under the bridge, this opens up all of this, recaptures all of this area here. So this becomes developable, new city resource,
absolutely,
character.
Absolutely. Now, I have to add to this that we do have Burlington Northern rolling through there. Okay? And you can see Burlington Northern down here. I've taken the liberty in this sketch to show that, 50 years from now, 20 years from now, this bridge is going to be around for 200 plus years. So I've shown that Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad bank, berm, is replaced with a very thin bridge that's open underneath for people to pass through. So if you look at a strategy for containing and controlling your infrastructure, you can bring back a way of life which, if you look at the historic pictures of Vancouver, people are crying out to re-experience. So yes, this sets up the mechanism for the city to create a series of investments over the next couple generations that fulfills everything that you see here. And immediately with the light rail in, we do have that pedestrian link to Fort Vancouver. So what I saw missing from this project was really that broader civic vision for how we can control this infrastructure to make it actually contribute to the betterment of our communities. It simply was an engineering exercise, and unfortunately the people that were asked to participate in that were given such narrowly defined scopes that they weren't allowed to be as creative and insightful as one would have hoped they would have been. there were a number of very nice, very good architectural firms, planning firms involved in this project that unfortunately were relegated to more of a decoration role within the project. And I just think it's such a tragedy that we were not able to use more creative minds during the beginning of this process when it would have been so much easier. And I can see by this notion of a straight alignment, separating the high-speed movement from the lower-speed movement, creating that shore-to-shore arterial. That I'm highly speculative here, but I would actually think if we would have done that, we would have a project that people would be taking pride in now, and not be so anxious about. And I feel the sentiment about being anxious is I would be anxious too. I would not want what's currently being proposed in my city.
Well, you're not alone. The question is, there must be a downside to this. What is the downside of this compared to the current proposal?
It requires a change.
So if you resist change, then you don't like it. But there must.
You have to,
I know when it comes to making decisions, I personally.
You need to back up in your decision-making process and go back to a point. You have to vet this idea for environmental impact. I know it'll be better, but you need to go through the procedures that are required by our government authorities to do that. You have a series of interlocal agreements that you would have to alter. You might get out of step relative to funding from the federal government. You might put that in jeopardy.
Well, you could get buy-in from the community if something for Hayden Island, for downtown Vancouver, for all of us. They end up saving a lot of money on this project. Well, when it comes to making decisions, I never go back and reconsider a decision. Once I make a good decision, I stay with it, except if something comes up that's so significant, it's a game changer, that's new, then I'll go back and I'll reevaluate that.
Right, and when I agreed to look at this, I stated that if I could not see an obviously better way of solving this problem, that I would not engage myself. I see there is a much better way of doing this project. To me, the change is administrative. I think politically we could go to Washington, D.C. and we can say we have a much better solution that will require much less money. I can go to people on Hayden Island and say, I know this freeway now is going to work to your advantage. I can go back to Fort Vancouver, that 1970s. I was there as a student trying to sort out and make the place viable in the future and say, you know, this freeway is now going to contribute to making this a much more desirable place to be. I'm confident that the benefits far outweigh the bureaucratic problems that would be created by what I always say is always trying to do the right thing.
It appears what you have before us is a contrast. On one hand, you have the bureaucratic process, the government trying to design and build a bridge, which already has consumed so much money. And really, how many happy campers do we have here with this design? We have those companies, those service providers, and those that are basically going to be involved in construction of this bridge saying, I don't care what it is, just build it. Full speed ahead, we want jobs, you know, that kind of thing. And just recently it was revealed that they've been saying this is going to bring 20,000 jobs to this area, and a few days ago the truth came out that it's less than 2,000 jobs multiplied times 10 years. Well, that's not the way you count jobs. So we want jobs, you know, but we want to be able to build the right thing.
David, if the citizens of Vancouver are willing to commit the equivalent of, what did I say, 4 years worth of every tax penny that they pay in order to do this right now with this design, it would be an odd community you live in. Which now that's
I think that has a lot to do with why they're not asking for a vote on this.
2,000 jobs. 2,000 jobs against all the tax money that has to be taken out of the economy to pay for this when this is clearly a better result. David, that just doesn't make sense to me. But I'm not an economist. I could only look at this and say, I have a possibility here, which I think is correct,